So, as we catch back up with Jacob, we made it. Jacob and Laban parted ways. We dealt with Rachel and the household gods, and probably with unsatisfactory answers. They set up a memorial stone and part ways in peace. And now Jacob turns from one person who does not have his best interests in mind, and what's he facing? Esau. Which, when the last time we saw Esau, what was Esau's attitude?
He's going to kill him?
Yeah, he's going to kill this Jacob guy. He's taken everything. He tricked me into giving away my birthright, and now he tricked my father into giving away my blessing, and I am going to get this Jacob guy. Rebekah sends her son away, and for all Jacob knows, Esau has been sitting there for 20 years going, when I see that Jacob again, I tell you, I will just get him, get him, this is what you do to him. And so Jacob's imagining all of this in his mind as he sets up. As we approach that, I'm going to ask kind of an off-the-wall question. How many of you read the Bible out loud to yourself? How many of you ever listen to an audio Bible? Joel does sometimes. I have a couple of copies. I asked that question because these sections are long on exposition, where it's simply stating these are the things that happen. These, and they're extended, and sometimes they repeat themselves. And so this morning I was debating. I said, well, maybe I'll have them all read it to themselves, and they can ask questions. And then I thought about it again, and I said, you should read it out loud anyways, because in reality, the Bible is meant to be read aloud. That engaging your senses and listening is a different process than just reading across and reading the lines on the page. And it's not something we necessarily appreciate as much, although people listen to audiobooks all the time now. I think I've stated this, that there's certain books where if I walk a path that I was listening to a powerful passage, or if I'm driving a road where I was listening to a book, sometimes that passage of that book will come back to me in that moment. And I'll remember that book because I heard it, and I was witnessing things, and I was listening actively, and that's a different experience. And it's also why I no longer introduce lessons in church, because I don't want you thinking about what I say the lesson's about, because you have ears for yourself. I want you listening to the Word of God, not listening for, well, Pastor said this passage is about this, therefore I'm going to listen to see if I can hear what Pastor says it's about. I want your ears to hear what you say it's about, because for that matter, what I say it's about might not be the most important thing for you to hear that day. So I think it's important every once in a while. I'm not saying you should all be sitting there reading out loud and driving your spouse or the people around you crazy at your lunch hour or whatever you're doing. But every once in a while it's worthwhile to read it out loud to, if you're studying the Bible together, instead of sitting and saying, well, read this, but to read it out loud so that you get not only the word in your mind, but you get it in your ears, which has a different power than just listening to it, or than just reading it. Either Ambrose or Augustine that got accused of doing something untoward because he was reading in his mind. And because for a long time, not everyone was literate, and so if you're reading something, it must be something you want to keep secret if you're not speaking it out loud. And so in general, people read things out loud. They did not read them silently. And so someone saw him reading the Bible and his lips were moving, but he wasn't saying anything. So, well, you need to read it. Whether that's a true story or not, I heard it and I like it, so I repeat it. So, Jacob goes to meet Esau. And we will read through 21, and then we will pause to see if there are any needed questions to be asked. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When he saw them, Jacob said, "This is God's army." And he named that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to Esau his brother, to the land of Seir, the region of Edom. He gave them a command, "Tell my lord Esau, this is what your servant Jacob says. I have lived as an alien with Laban until this very recently. I have cattle, donkeys, flocks, male servants, female servants, and I have sent this message to inform my lord, so that I may find favor in your sight." Now the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, "We came to your brother Esau. Now he is coming to meet you, and he has 400 men with him." So Jacob was terrified and very distressed. He divided the people who were with him, as well as the flocks and the herds and the camels, into 2 camps. He said, "If Esau comes to one camp and strikes at the other camp, will escape." Jacob said, "God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your relatives, and I will do good for you.' I am not worthy even a bit of all the mercy and the faithfulness that you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with just my staff, and now I have grown into 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I am afraid that he will come and strike me and the mothers as well as the children. You said, 'I will surely do good for you, and make your descendants like the grains of the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted because there are so many.'" Jacob spent the night there and selected a gift for Esau his brother from the possessions he had: 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. He handed them over to his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Cross over in front of me. Keep some space between each herd and the next one." He commanded the one in front, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks, 'Whose people are you? Where are you going? Whose herds are in front of you?' then you shall say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. It is a gift sent to you, my lord Esau. Look, he is right behind us.'" He commanded the second group and the third and all those who followed the herds, "This is how you are to speak to Esau when you meet him. You shall say, 'What's more, look, your servant is right behind us.'" Jacob said, "I will win his favor with the gift that I have sent ahead of me, and after that I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me." So the gift was sent ahead of him, but he himself spent that night in the camp. In that narrative, what things jump out at you? Or what questions do you have?
In verse 5, I guess, "Now I am sending this message to my Lord." This Jacob putting himself in a position under his brother.
He's sucking. To put it more kindly, he's showing Esau that although he connived, he respects him. And perhaps he's trying to demonstrate that he's learned humility in 20 years. And as twins who did not get along, probably Jacob rarely seemed humble in Esau's eyes. And so we're a very materialist people. We want things. We think the only things that matter is stuff. We think in terms of the stuff we have, and we think people are only motivated by stuff. In fact, the Marxist socialist idea is that if you take away people's stuff and give and supply what they need, it will end all strife, because all strife comes from stuff. And the capitalists say, well, everybody wants stuff, and therefore, if we just let them get as much stuff as they want, well, then they'll be busy doing the things that the society needs, and everyone will have stuff, because stuff is all that matters. On the contrary, what is Jacob saying when he addresses Esau as my lord and goes through all of this? Might be Esau's primary reason for hating Jacob.
Showing off how much stuff he has.
I think perhaps the opposite. What did Jacob do to Esau? Twice.
Essentially stole everything that was Esau's.
Yes. But what does that really do to Esau? Okay, why?
Listen.
Think the opposite of the way we think. So it's not about stuff, is what I'm saying. Forget the stuff. Betrayed his trust, and in the process did what? There you go. He belittled him. He made a fool of Esau. Esau comes in looking for his bowl of stew, and Jacob takes advantage of him. And now it's said Esau sold, I wonder if that was even said among the servants. Esau sold his birthright for a pot of stew. What a moron what a hot-headed moron that Esau is. Esau goes out hunting. He's looking forward to the blessing of his father. And he finds out that rotten little Jacob has weaseled his way into his father's tent and stolen his blessing right out from under Esau's nose. What a fool Jacob made Esau feel. And so then this extravagant show that Jacob is putting on, if you see it almost as he's paying tribute to his superior, instead of just saying, oh, Jacob took all the stuff away from Esau, and he's trying to give some stuff back so Esau will feel better because now he has stuff too. But if you see it as Jacob's trying to show Esau that he does respect him, it almost makes more sense. He's not trying to bribe Esau.
Well, wouldn't it be Esau knowing that he had nothing before God blessed
certainly that Jacob, well, he would know that Jacob left with nothing. And then, without this, Jacob's thinking, if I show up with all of my extravagance, and Esau comes upon me, and he sees that conniving person took everything that belonged to me. Look, he's a respected, he left with nothing, and God, with the blessing God was supposed to give to me, he gained all of this, and I'm still nothing. Jacob doesn't know what Esau's life is like. He's thinking, that little rat has packed away all of my stuff. And so by paying tribute to Esau, Jacob is not so much filling his pocketbook, because why would that be foolish? If Jacob's afraid that Esau's going to swoop in with his 400 men and kill, and he's going to need to run away, if Esau really wanted Jacob's stuff, what could he do? Just take it. But if Esau wants respect, and to see that his brother has learned humility, and to be reconciled, then this is a way to show that respect. And I think it's important to point this out, partially because there are still cultures that deal more in respect and honor than they do in stuff. Because stuff is worthless. And hi Shauna.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm having a good day.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. For all the value we put on stuff, everyone recognizes stuff goes away and it breaks and it needs to be replaced. And it means nothing. And a weasel with a lot of stuff is still a weasel. And a great man with nothing is still a great man, so to speak. And so, we could do to entertain the thought that maybe Solomon's right and the reputation is greater than gold. And a bruised ego is harder to appease and repay than stolen goods ever will. So I think that's what's behind the "my Lord." I disrespected you, so now I will go out of my way to show all the respect and deference that I can. Other thoughts or comments, things you noticed?
So if Esau had 400 men, he must have been doing pretty well.
Yes, and we'll get to that. But in a way, it's as if Jacob's worst fears have been realized. That, because Jacob has servants and maidservants, and he's got sons, and his sons probably have servants and hangers-on and all the things. And yet, here's Esau, who's grown, who is always stronger, always more impetuous, always more emotional in a way. And he's got the 400 men at his side. If they're men who hang out with Esau, What kind of men must they be?
A lot like Esau.
You think so? We tend to hang out with the likes of us. Other thoughts or comments?
Wondered if during those 20 years, if Jacob dwelled on the situation more than Esau, or did either one of them think of the other one during, or did they both obsess over what had been done?
Obsessed doesn't seem to be the case, but you'd think it'd be impossible for them not to think. You know, Jacob far from home, and Esau swallowing the bitter pill of the kind of backwards blessing he received. Just, you know, but you develop and you learn and you grow.
So I'm assuming there was really no communication during that time. It would have been-
It doesn't appear so. Although it also appears that Jacob assumes his father is still alive, that news would have reached him. Other thoughts or concerns?
So, the angels of God.
That's kind of a silly note.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Does it really matter if it's the exact same angels versus other angels versus the ones that had gone up and down on the ladder?
Well, I mean, did all the angels look alike? I don't know. Or does every angel
So-
have its own distinct features like us humans?
Well, you know, do zebras all look alike to zebras? I don't know.
Oh, no, they're all different.
I know they're all different, but can the zebras tell?
I bet you they can.
They say, well, that's Huey over there and that's Bill over here. I don't know.
I'm sure they
So-
can tell the difference.
so-
Today we have computers.
Angels are individual, sentient beings who serve at God's liberty on behalf of human beings. Gabriel, when he gets mad at Zechariah, says, I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God. Who are you to question what I tell you is going to happen? Seems like he's got a little bit of pride. Almost a little bit of like well-earned pride in his work that he gets to serve the Lord Almighty. So, yes, there are individual angels and they are distinct from each other. Whether some of them have curly, scruffy beards and some have straight beards, whether they have different pigments to their glorious shine, whether all that stuff we're not told. One day, I guess we'll see. Isaiah sees the seraphim who have 6 wings. But Moses had cherubs put on the ark. Talk about archangels, so there's different ranks, there's different tasks that they perform. There's all these things about the angels that we don't know. But according to that note, to say that they're the same angels that Jacob saw going up and down on the ladder of God seems... Yeah, are all platypuses named Terry?
So that brings me to my next question, which is probably the main question. It says, this is the camp of God, so he named it, and I know it says 2 camps. Why 2 camps?
So it's funny that he later divides his own people into 2 camps.
I see that, but that was afterwards.
That there's the earthly camp of Jacob alongside the heavenly camp of God's army. And so it's a reminder that wherever I go, God's angels camp along with me. Does this remind you of any other incident in the Bible? I've mentioned it as one of my favorite Old Testament accounts. Just give the basic outline of what you're thinking of.
Ezekiel had the army of angels on the ridge.
You're right with the first letter, and you're right with the situation. It's Elisha, who's in Dothan, and the king of Syria is ticked off because Elisha keeps telling the king of Israel in Samaria where his army is setting up ambushes against Israel. And so the king finds out that he thought there was a spy, and he finds out that it's really the prophet of God. And he says, well, then we got to get that prophet of God because he's ruining all of our warring season. The season's going to be lost if we don't get to kill some Israelites soon. And he surrounds this tiny city of Dothan in the hills, and Elisha's servant wakes up and sees the army at the gates, and he goes, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're going to die. Elisha looks at him and goes, what are you worried about? We have more people on our side than they have on theirs, and the servant, this tiny little walled city, they're just going to march right over us, break down our door. And Elisha prays that, open the eyes of my servant so that he can see. And he sees the chariots and the angels of God in full battle array. And then God strikes the armies of the Syrians blind, and they get surrounded, and Elisha marches them into the gates of Samaria where the armies of Jerusalem surround them. The king of Israel goes, what am I supposed to do with these people? And Elisha says, well, they're your prisoners, so treat them as honored prisoners of war. And so they throw a feast and have a party, and they all go home happy. Well, his army got spared, so he says, I guess I don't need to kill Israelites this year. I can make war elsewhere. So, that's what that reminds me of, that Jacob catches a glimpse of the reality that is always there. What effect does seeing the armies of God have on him, however? We're not going to get to what I want to get to. That's okay. Felt all better, right?
Concerned about Esau's response.
Yeah, so he sees the armies of God. He sends the messengers. He hears the report that Esau is coming with 400 men. And is Jacob's response, well, I have nothing to worry about. The armies of God are all around me. Is that how he responds? He's terrified and very distressed. He starts to make his plans for how he's going to assuage Esau's wrath. But then what does he do?
That's fine.
He does.
And then on
So that's
top-
his preparation. But then what's he do?
And then praise.
And then he prays. What's the content of his prayer?
Well, he first reminds God that, hey, you said I was going to prosper.
Okay? So, put that into a simpler term. What is the content of Jacob's prayer?
Well, he says you're going to prosper, and he also says, be safe.
Okay? So, hold up God's promise and in faith ask God to keep it. So, the idea of angel armies doesn't take away fear. For all of the touched by an angel, precious moments, angels, all the things that we remind ourselves that angels are around us, there's nothing wrong with reminding us that those angels are there. But when we are afraid, we don't look to angels. To whom do we look?
The Lord who sends the angels.
The Lord who sends the angels. And how do we know what the Lord has in mind for us?
He loves us.
How do we know?
Guides us.
Okay, I'm looking for something a little bit more specific even. How do we know that God loves us? But yes, ultimately he dies for us. But Jacob doesn't have.
He has kept his promise by making it prosper.
Richly and daily provides.
God says he loves us. Go first to the Word and the promises of God. What God has spoken, Jacob knows will be, despite everything that his eye sees. And then you can, once you hear God's promise, then you can look at what he's done to keep that promise. So, yes, he richly and daily provides. But at the moment, it might seem like he's not providing. Yes, you can know that Jesus died for you and rose for you. But it's God's word of promise that tells you what that means. That God says your sins are forgiven. That God says you are a child of God. That God says that he will be with you. That God says all things will work for your good. That God says, I have prepared a place for you in heaven, and this is how I have shown that it is true. Go first to the Word, to the promises. Make that the richness of your prayers. And that's how Jacob overcomes. Or that's how Jacob faces his fear.
Well, why did he goes and says, okay, Lord, you said to me, this is what you're going to do. I know I'm not worth it, but you did do this. You have made me. You have made me prosper. And he says, save me from Esau. But then he goes back and says, you said I will surely make you prosper. Why does he do that? It seems like he does that twice.
You never repeat yourself?
I mean, does he really have to, Lord, you did this. You said you were going to do this for me.
So
Thank you for doing it. Hey, you said you're going to do this for me again.
we're going to have to break this off because church is going to start soon. But remember that prayer is not telling God anything he doesn't know. You're not going to convince God to do anything in your prayers. Prayer is opening up your heart and saying what's on your heart to the Lord. And God promises to hear and answer the fears and concerns and the hopes and the dreams and the desires of your heart according to his goodness. So as Jacob prays, it's not so much that he's trying to say, God, you said this and now you have to do it. But he's wrestling, little foreshadowing for next week. He's wrestling with what God has spoken, what his eyes see, and what his heart feels. And so the point of tension is where he repeats himself. That's where we have to end, and we'll pick up next week.